It's late, big city, you're tired, stressed, and on a mission. And the last thing you need is trouble at a gas station. Hey guys, retired Lieutenant Todd Heaton here with Humilitas First. This happened in Kansas City, Missouri. Population right around 512,000. This hand-to-hand exchange that we're seeing, well, it was due to this guy asking the victim for $1. That was an old school bad guy ruse that was used a lot early on in my law enforcement career. Hey man, can I get $1? Hold up a second. Can I holler at you? Could I bum a cigarette or a light? News reports show that these things, they do still happen, though I think that the disinterested near past, well, it's largely replaced these kinds of old school ruses. It was February 22nd, 2024, around 10:40 p.m. This is the victim. He's paying for something at the counter. We're going to see 2 out of the 3 robbery crew members walk into the store. How did the victim come to stop at this point? Did this member of the robbery crew flag him down? Maybe he rolls down the window. Yeah, what do you need? Hey man, can I get $1? Now this is going to sound cold and callous, but at this time of night in this type of city, when somebody that I do not know with their hood up, which tends to conceal one's identity, tries to flag me down, that's not happening. Whatever he needs, that's his problem. That's not my problem. I'm not even going to stop. I'm going to keep rolling. The victim, he parked in a strange spot. If he'd just gotten gas, well, he wasted time moving to this other position. Maybe he pulls up to run in to get a receipt, a pack of gum, or whatever. Either way, you really do want and need to be efficient at gas stations, especially in high crime areas after dark. If you're interested in learning more about best practices or the strategies that I believe in as it relates to navigating gas stations, I just added a playlist with over a dozen videos. Maybe check that out. The robber with the gun exiting the store right now. He now has a rear ambush position on the victim. The victim's just giving up his back. We're going to see him use surprise, speed, and violence of action. The violence of action is bringing the gun up to threaten the very life of the victim. And by this point, it's game over. But they're still going to shoot him. But even though he's complying, he is still going to take a round. Now, I can't show that level of violence on this platform. That would cause me problems with community guidelines. The video would get age restricted. Nobody would see the video. So we're not going to do that. If you want to see the full video, go to humilitasfirst.locals.com. You don't have to be a contributor. I'm not going to restrict this video to only those who support this work. A week ago Wednesday, my wife and I left Central Illinois for Wyoming after our 19-year-old son had a medical emergency. We drove straight through the night. He's also fine now. But that trip reminded me when life throws stress, urgency, and fatigue at you, you still have to make smart calls. Okay, so I'm going to share the strategies that I used. Did we execute these strategies perfectly? No, we're not perfect. None of us are perfect. You got to do the best you can. Yes, you want to be disciplined. But you know what? Things are going to pop up. If your wife needs to go to the restroom, well, you're going to have to find a way to deal with this. It's pretty easy for us guys, not so easy for the ladies. There was only one time that the gas station we picked, it wasn't the right one. And it was actually my wife who didn't feel comfortable, who wanted to go move on to the next one. I didn't see any, physical threats, but she was the one that needed to go. So that was her call. I did a U-turn before we even got wheels on the lot. Efficiency is a winning strategy. First, my fuel strategy. I would stop at or just below half a tank. That way, if I didn't like the look of the place, I could keep driving. Yes, the trade-off is you're going to have to stop more frequently than if you just ran the tank close to dry. But if you do that, then you're largely removing the option to just go to another gas station. Especially if you're trying to get gas 20 miles or greater outside of any large cities. If you wait until you're on empty, then you're going to have a lot less options. Rather, I would stop up to about 20 miles before a bigger city or after the bigger city. There was only one time in Laramie, Wyoming, which population was like 32,000, which is most definitely not a big city, that I did have to fuel up because I was low. So finding myself pretty low on gas in Laramie, what I chose to do was to stop at the first available exit where gasoline was available, thinking that if there was a problem, I would just drive to the other side. Sometimes one side of the city is better than the other. Personally, I'm going to try to stop on the periphery if I have to stop in a city that I don't know anything about. I'm going to try to stop on the edge. I don't want to get into the heart of the city. Now, my wife had checked the population, so I knew it wasn't a big city. And it turns out it was no problem at all. One thing that I noticed was to appendix carry for hours while seated in the driver's position. Well, that's very uncomfortable. So I would just move my holster with the firearm in it into the center console that I rest my elbow on. But I would always reseat that holster on my waistline before getting out. Now, we drove straight through going out to Wyoming, and it took us about 17 hours or more to get up in the mountains where my son was located at a ranch. We ended up staying one night in Riverton, Wyoming. Bringing our son back home did not involve an emergency, so we were able to slow down, drive during the daylight hours, and we used crimegrade.org to check hotels as it related to vehicle theft. Why? Well, because wherever we stayed, we wanted our car to be there in the morning when we woke up. There was one spot we thought was going to be a nice hotel in western Nebraska, but it turned out to be a hot zone for vehicle theft. So we searched for and found an alternative. We couldn't really do a lot of pre-planning as we knew that we'd have to be flexible and maybe stop early depending upon how our son was doing with pain and traveling. If everything went well, and it did, then we hoped to make it close to halfway home that first day. My wife doesn't routinely do the research. We've kind of done some of that together for things like trip planning, vacations. And even now, after the second emergency room visit, my focus was primarily on driving, navigating when and where to stop, eating a little, and sleeping a little, then rinsing and repeating. Out of a 72-hour period, including that second trip to the ER, we were driving about half of those hours. And I didn't have time in between to be doing deep dives on things like crime, reviews, and comparables for hotels. So I just thought back to some of the experiences as a police officer in a city 100,000 plus. I told my wife to look for hotels that were either fairly new, within the last 15 years or so, or if the hotel was built several decades ago, to look for one that's been refurbished within the last 15 years or so. Why? Because during my career, I saw certain motels which had not been refurbished in decades, and little by little, they just let their facilities deteriorate. Well, guess what that brought? Little by little, it brought clientele that were drug dealers, prostitutes, throw in some addicts, and there would be a much higher probability of you getting robbed or shot in the parking lot. When management doesn't care, well, that's going to draw people that don't care. And besides, it's my money, so I get to decide where I want to patronize, and I am not looking for that kind of drama. This is no kind of guarantee by any means. There's a big difference between a city 100,000 plus and a hotel that's maybe decades old out in the middle of nowhere in western Nebraska. If you have an owner and management that cares and things were well maintained along the way, well, maybe it doesn't need to be refurbished. But here's the thing, I don't have time to dig down on those concerns and questions. I'm just looking to keep it simple. I'm just looking to use my preferences to try to keep my family safe. Yes, it's a sliding scale. None of us would stay in the worst of these deteriorated AI generated photos. But what about when the signs are far more subtle? I'm just looking to hedge bets because I know that when the ownership and the management doesn't care so much, that's going to draw people that don't care so much. That's going to draw problems. I would not expect this last clue to apply to a hotel that's been built within the last 10 or 15 years. But the last clue that I'll leave you with is if the hotel is hiring off-duty police officers to work security overnight, that's a clue. That is not someplace I'm going to be staying with my family, because that hotel is not going to waste the money to pay an off-duty police officer to be there all night long unless there's a potential for violence. They're willing to pay because they're looking to mitigate risks. What else could we do? We hired an off-duty police officer in a marked squad car. No, I'm just going to go to the next hotel, probably on the other side of town. Look, whether you have hours to plan or seconds to decide, the key is simple. Do what you can to keep your options open and avoid unnecessary risks.